do the doctrinal differences between Catholics and Orthodox amount to matters of unshakable dogma, or is it really just theological quibbling in most instances?
Well, I would say, frankly, that it's primarily theological quibbling. Why do I say this? Firstly, the Orthodox will tell you that the final judge of any theological issue is an ecumenical council, of which they believe there have only been 7. However, they also believe, most of them, that you can't have an ecumenical council without the Pope of Rome. They also believe that the Pope of Rome is incapable of calling an ecumenical council without them. Therefore, there can never be another ecumenical council. Which means that if we were to take what they say at face value, every dispute outside what has been determined by the 7 ecumenical councils really is theological quibbling. What's interesting to me is that you never heard them deny the Immaculate Conception or the Assumption until we define them. And then you got also, oh, well, you've got no right to define them, and so on and so forth. Even Filioque is the question of the procession of the Holy Ghost from the Father and the Son. It's interesting because the term for Filioque in Greek, which escapes what's left of my mind, has connotations that it doesn't have in Latin. And those connotations can be heretical. Mm. So, I mean, let's put it this way. There is nothing that goodwill on both sides couldn't handle. But finding goodwill on both sides at the same time has always been kind of problematic.
That's good, though, in a sense that it's quibbling rather than unshakable dogma, because that means it's like, okay, then just stop quibbling and we can get this done.
No, and it would be, it has to be said that, St. Thomas teaches that while heresy is objectively speaking worse than schism, because of denial of God's truth, subjectively schism is worse than heresy. And the reason for this is that with a heresy, both the heretic and the Orthodox believe that they're pushing for God's own word. But with schism, on one or usually both sides, it's all about me and my turf and my power and how wonderful I am. And if you study the history of schisms, you won't find a one of them that couldn't have been solved if either or both parties hadn't been schmucks. But because schmuckerei is an important part of being a human being, even if you're a cleric. And remember, schisms always come from the pretensions of clerics. You've never heard about a single schism that was started by a layman. That's why St. Thomas teaches that subjectively they're worse, because it's all about the glorification of the self. I think that the current Patriarch of Moscow made an extremely valid point when, as Archbishop of Smolensk, he declared that schism is like a divorce, and it's the result of human sin. And until both sides realize that our division is a sin, an ongoing sin, that we've gone on as though we don't need the other, just like a divorce. We've gone on with a huge lack of love. Neither side sees this thing as a terrible thing which needs to be undone. And because we don't love the other. We don't really see, we as Catholics do not see the schism as the schism with the Orthodox as a horrible thing that needs to be fixed at all costs, and neither do they.
I thought you said something differently in a previous question on the Orthodox. You had said that the Orthodox see the modernism problems, and that is pushing forth the effort to reunite.
This is true. They're both true at once. Obviously, the Patriarch would not have made that statement had he not had some particular interest in it.
Okay.
But it shouldn't be too much of a shock that both sides have contradictory currents going on.
Okay.
None of us want to change where we are or what we are. None of us want to ever admit that our side were ever wrong.
Yeah.
We just don't. And because of that, neither side can ask forgiveness for what was done in the past, and worse, neither side can get past it. Again, it's very much like an argument in a family. How much worse are family arguments, long-standing family arguments, than those with strangers?
That's true.
You know, if you and your brother, say, got into it over something, you know how these things can go on for years.
Yeah.
And everything adds to it, and everything gets pulled into it. And it's the big thing. And yet, you've got this horrible thing going on one level, and on another level, you die for the guy.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know how to put it to you, but that's fallen nature. What makes it so reprehensible in this area is that supposedly we're all doing what we're doing for the love of Christ, because we're all such good Christians and stuff. I have my doubts. But I can tell you this much. There are a couple of jokes that come to mind, which are very fitting. One is the Catholics will tolerate any amount of heresy but no schism. Orthodox will tolerate any amount of schism but no heresy. Another is that in the East, authority has been swallowed up by tradition. And in the West, tradition has been swallowed up by authority. I stand by both of those as being more real than funny. But I would say it's almost as though the two halves were meant to act as correctives on each other. You know, to correct the other's stranger traits. And that their division has allowed both sides to go off into cloud cuckoo land. And that, because as we know, there's no holiness without humility and no humility without humiliation, this long road of nonsense that we Catholics have traveled since Vatican II, and the years of oppression by the Muslims and the communists, should have humbled both sides sufficiently to where we can make a real stab at overcoming it. But fortunately, being the wonderful human beings that we are, I'm sure that we've got more than enough pride to share and to spare. So let's just keep doing what we're doing because it's worked so very well for us all.
Okay. Second question by Mr. Bennett. What should we think of the Eastern Catholic Churches in communion with Rome when Rome herself now, at least implicitly, deals with the Orthodox patriarchs as the legitimate claimants to the ancient sees? Has the Uniate solution failed?
Well, you have two different things going on at once. Has the Uniate solution failed? No, it hasn't failed. How do we know this? We know this because every one of the Eastern churches in communion with Rome has produced and are producing saints. So, no, they haven't failed. Have they brought the entirety of the East into communion with Rome? No, they have not. But that was probably not going to happen all by itself anyway. Why an Eastern Rite person who discovers the need for communion with Rome should be denied it? Oh no, we won't take you because you're under your patriarch and he's a schismatic, so get stuffed. I don't think that would be a very smart way of handling it.
Yeah.
Also, to be honest with you, the Eastern Catholics in this current crisis within the Church have often shown themselves to be better Catholics than we Latins. So, and God knows that they've also provided a home for a lot of Latins in the West who would have lost the faith if they were forced to deal with what most Catholics have to deal with in their parishes. So no, I wouldn't say that they're a failure at all. They haven't perhaps accomplished what their initial authors wanted, but they did something else. That, however, let's put it this way. There could be no solution with the Orthodox that does not guarantee the safety and place of the Eastern Catholics, and their fidelity to Rome should never be besmirched, especially when it's often been done at a price. One of the largest schisms, re-schisms, that ever occurred, people don't talk about this now, it happened in this country, when a large number of Ruthenian Catholics suffered a certain amount of abuse at the hands of the Latin hierarchy in the 1890s, and they went back into Orthodoxy.
Wow.
There are a lot of those churches around, a lot of Russian Orthodox churches that are really Ruthenian Orthodox. And it's interesting that if there was one single person responsible for that schism, it was oddly enough the same man who was responsible for the schism of the Polish National Catholics, and that was Archbishop Ireland of Chicago.
Wow.
There are very few men who can claim to be responsible for not one but two schisms, and I think that's something Chicago should be proud of.
Wow. Okay, that's it for this episode. If you enjoyed listening to Charles, please subscribe to our Tumbler House YouTube channel. If you'd like to ask Charles a question on the show, please contact us at our website, tumblerhouse.com. Thank you for watching.